Hello and welcome to Tips and Tricks for Seraphim. Starting off with the T1 Air Scout. It is the only unit in the game to have an ability called Death Cam, or the ability to see for a small radius around it after it's shot down for 20 seconds. It doesn't appear in the unit description, and I do get all my information from the Supreme Commander wiki, so if this has changed in Forged Alliance Forever, feel free to just leave a comment down below. And in addition to the death cam, there's also a small space in between the wings that anti-air fire can happen to shoot through. So this damage avoiding ability combined with the death cam easily make this T1 Air Scout the best T1 Air Scout in the game. Moving on to the dirty T1 Combat Scout. This little guy right here, this little unassuming T1 Scout, is one of two units, if I'm not mistaken, to have both the personal stealth and the cloaking ability. If you see right here, personal radar stealth and cloaking. The only other unit in the game, again if I'm not mistaken, to have this is the fully upgraded Cybran Commander. And honestly, I've always found it a little bit weird for this random Tech 1 unit to be the only other unit in the game to have this very powerful ability, but let me show you how you can use this. Let me go ahead and turn this guy's cloaking on. I believe his radar stealth is always on, and this little toggle here is just for cloaking. Move them to an unclaimed mass extractor. And as you see, he was cloaked a second ago and now he's moving, and he can be seen and shot at again. But let me just go ahead and teleport him to move things up a little bit. Oop, a little bit too far, bud. Bam. So now with him on the mass extractor, give him a second to go invisible. And this is super annoying. The enemy can't target him in the T1 phase. The commander does have an Omni suite on him, but if the commander is on the other side of the map or something, the opponent can't see this guy and shoot at him without freaking Tech 3 Omni, which again seems a little bit silly to me. But you can do this, and the enemy engineer will not be able to build the mass extractor with the scout on the mass point. You can get around this by telling an engineer to do an attack move, and I think the engineer will automatically scoop this guy up even though he can't technically be seen or shot at. The attack move should scoop him up, and then you can build it as the opponent. Or you can tell some tanks to just ground fire nearby. And one final fact about the Combat Scout for Seraphim is that they are the only faction that does not have the ability to make Ghetto Gunships. And what that is essentially all the other factions, you can build the light assault bots, and you can load up your transports full of light assault bots. And the labs or light assault bots are the only units that can actually shoot off the rails of the transport. It does more damage than Tech 2 gunships, but you can't aim them. You can only kind of tell the gunship to hover around, and then the labs will just shoot at whatever they can. But if we zoom in on the Seraphim Combat Scouts, their little gun is fixed position on their arm, so they can't aim it. And I think that's a pretty decent trade-off, but just something to be aware of if you're playing as Seraphim. And speaking of transports, each of the Seraphim transports have 2 additional slots on each of their wings than all of the other factions. So if we count these all up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each of the wings have 8 slots compared to the other faction's 6. And this is especially potent with light artillery attacks because there's an additional 4 light artillery that you can cram onto these wings, 2 additional ones on each wing, and that's just additional stopping power that makes Seraphim transport drops especially deadly. And speaking of light artillery, the Seraphim have hands down the best light artillery in the game. It not only has high DPS, it also has fragmentation shells, and in addition to all that, these guys are one of the few hovering T1 units. Moving on to Seraphim Navy, they have one of the most devastating combos in the entire game. At Tech 3, they unlock the Submarine Hunter, which, despite its somewhat misleading name to new players, does not only attack submarines. And it is, in fact, one of the most powerful ship-to-ship vessels in the entire game. One of its few flaws is that while it can surface to shoot at anti-air like torpedo bombers, you're probably not going to want to do this that often because it can't attack hovering units and it can't bombard on the shore because it does just have the torpedoes and anti-air. So instead, you'll probably want to accompany it with the Tech 2 destroyers that can also submerge, the only faction to be able to do so. And with these two units together, the Tech 2 destroyer and the Tech 3 submarine hunter, the submarine hunter can stand its ground even against some experimentals for its cost. And if you want to bombard the shore, you can just raise these destroyers to do so. The Seraphim Navy is also unique in that they do not have a strategic missile submarine, and instead the vessel with the ability to launch strategic missiles goes to the battleship. Another little bonus for the Seraphim Navy that is similar to the Aeon faction is the mobile shield generator that can float. So of course you can help your land forces with this, but you can also help your naval forces, and shielding can be extremely helpful in essentially almost every single situation. So don't forget to add in these guys to any of your naval fleets as well. Moving on to the commander upgrades, the Seraphim commander is the ideal combat commander. On his back right here, you can get the nano repair system as well as the enhanced nano repair system, which gives it an extremely fast health regen rate. And on his left arm right here, you can get this super weapon, which if you read the description right about here, increases the main cannon's damage to 850% and grants an area of effect bonus, making this thing just an absolute beast and borderline experimental. Of course, you'll want to be careful using your commander in this way because if he dies, of course it's game over, but he has some seriously good abilities if you do want to go down that route. A cheaper route is this restoration field, which will repair nearby ally units, which also should not be ignored because this can be incredibly useful. And of course, he also has this more early game gun upgrade bonus, as all the factions do as well. It's also worth noting that the Seraphim support commanders are also incredibly powerful. They have access to overcharge, they also have the nano repairability, and in a group, they are practically unstoppable with the combat comm status as well as the default Tech 3 engineering suite that all support commanders have. So do not forget about the support commanders either for very late game strategies. When it comes to experimentals, the Seraphim Experimental Assault Bot, one of only 2 experimentals, excluding, of course, the long-range artillery / nuke launcher. Some general tips for this guy is 1, if you get into a one-on-one fight with another experimental, it can be from any faction, do not turn and run, because his arms can only turn maybe 90 degrees or so, and if we tell this guy to try to run away, all of his weaponry will stop firing and he will just get pelted on while he's trying to run away. So usually it's better to just try to take a fight head on one-on-one so all of his weapons can get the max amount of damage, or even you might want to charge whatever experimental it is for the following reason. And that reason is, of course, to the players that know, the experimental assault bot for Seraphim has a suicide weapon that once this guy goes down, it spawns a lightning ball of death that will attack anything in its range. So you see I have my own team over here, and unfortunately not even my own team is safe from this ball that just becomes a neutral thing that you can't control. But it can be incredibly obnoxious, because if you see I made right here a factory, or what was a factory, this thing will just annihilate anything in the direct vicinity of this. So if you do get in a one-on-one fight with an enemy experimental, you might just want to charge into it so that this ball takes it out. Or another good tactic with this guy is just to use it as a pure suicide weapon. This weapon is very powerful. It took out a lot of the surroundings. So if you just march it into an enemy base, not only will it have all of its guns firing, but it will also die and hopefully take out some infrastructure as well. It is, of course, good to be conscious of the fact that it is a gigantic mass dump right on the front door of your enemy's base, because this can help the enemy recover very quickly. But again, the suicide weapon is incredibly potent. Just make sure that your troops get out of the blast radius and that your teammates are aware of this as well. As for the other experimental, the experimental bomber, it can be a very, very useful tool in the right hands. It does take some microing to get useful. And just to show you why, if I tell this guy to attack these tanks over here and then return to base, let's just watch him go forward to the target. He's gonna drop his bomb right there, keep flying, and then way later he's gonna try to slowly turn around. And if you imagine that this is the very, very front lines, this guy's slow maneuver around here will leave him extremely exposed to enemy anti-air defense on the ground, not to mention enemy fighters that can come in and try to swoop this guy from behind. And that's not even talking about the pathfinding of this guy. He has a very long run-in range, and if the target moves too much, he might just not drop a bomb at all, and it's just going to be an entirely wasted attack run. So what you're probably going to want to do most of the time is ground fire. So just make sure this thing right here is on ground fire, and then give an attack order right near enemy units. I guess I can just try to bomb my own guys just to show. And right when he drops his bomb, we're going to tell him to retreat. And let's see if we can do this. So watch closely. He dropped it. Tell this guy to get the heck out of dodge. And look at how much better that is. Bomb took out all those units. Of course, they were mostly T2, but he didn't get anywhere near the front line. And one even more advanced technique you can do with the Tech 4 bomber is called hover bombing. And what this entails is normally a bomber will have to do a long run, drop its bomb, and then you tell it to retreat. But hover bombing, as the name implies, is trying to get this thing to hover, and you're going to have to spam a bunch of move commands to make it stop trying to go wherever it wants. And then you're going to have to spam an attack right in the middle of all of the move commands. You're definitely going to want to have this hotkeyed. I set mine to A. And you do that by going to key bindings, orders, and then this guy right here, I have mine set to A. It does take some practice to get this down consistently, but let's see if I can do this. So the gist of it, again, you're going to want to, it's going to try to turn left and right, but you just keep spamming move commands and then try to get an attack move just right in front. Didn't do it that time, again, kind of finicky, but move command, and there we have it. And I should also add, while we're on the T4 bomber, that its ground fire will affect submerged units. So if you do see some submarines rolling around, or maybe the enemy's commander is underwater, you can ground fire with the experimental to damage these units. And my last tip is for anyone who has ever thought to themselves, man, this game is so cool, I wish I had friends to play this with, and or, man, this is so cool, I wish I knew people my level. Head over to my Discord. Many of my videos are aimed at getting new players into this game because I think it's awesome, and my Discord has a dedicated channel to people who are just starting out and want to make friends that might not be 2,000 plus rated players. But yeah guys, now that I have finally done tips videos for all of the 4 factions, I will say that it is absolutely normal to have favorites and not so favorites of the factions. I know Guile doesn't like the Cybrins or the Space Socialists, the Duelist isn't a huge fan of the Aeon, and one of my good friends doesn't really like the UEF. Unfortunately for me, that faction has to be the Seraphim because honestly, look at them, asymmetry. I just have never been a huge fan of asymmetry, and a lot of their units are just kind of why to me. Like the scout that has both radar and cloaking, why? Like this is more just of a troll than anything else. And their air scout also is the only unit in the game to have death cam. That's another thing that just seems like, why does Seraphim get it and no one else? And just the asymmetry, irks me a little bit. But yeah, to each their own. And on that note, I will say thank you all for the support you have all shown me. My channel's been growing, I get so many supportive comments, and it has just been an honor doing this for all you guys. So again, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more to come.